welcome back to my channel. My name is Frøydis. I'm in eastern Norway. I had no intentions of not posting any videos for most of the year. I think my last video was in February. And in fact, I had a lot of ideas for what I wanted to do early in the year. But the thing is, I kind of lost my knitting mojo. And I know this is a very common occurrence amongst knitters and crafters, losing your mojo, your creativity, but I've only been knitting for about 3 years and this hasn't really happened to me before, especially not for such long periods of time. So I thought maybe I would rewind back to early spring and take you through the year with me, told through the knitting projects I have completed and not completed. So back in spring, which by spring I mean April, I was very busy studying for my last final to complete my bachelor's degree in plant science, which is something I've been working on for a very long time. And I was very stressed and very busy. There was a lot of things to do, but I wasn't struggling with my knitting mojo at the time at all. In fact, I remember just wanting to knit all the time, and my plan was that once I was done, I would just knit for the rest of the summer. That was my plan. And I was surprisingly productive during this time in spring, considering how busy I was. And the first finished object from that time is the one I'm wearing, which is a black, very V-neck raglan by Jessie Maed Designs, which I have made quite a few of in the past, and this will not be my last, and it will not be the last one you'll see in this video either. I knit this in Highland wool from Hobby. It's so full of cat hair. Oh my gosh. My cat is asleep upstairs, by the way. He doesn't know I'm filming, or otherwise he would have been all over this situation. I mean, I don't think there's that much more to say about the very V-neck raglan. It's just a really great design. I've knit many of them in the past and I just wear them a lot. Yeah, I'm a big fan. And then in April and May I knitted one of my dream knits, which is the Into the Wild sweater by Tania Barley. I'm gonna talk more about this in my next video. Because if I include it properly now, this video will just be way too long. So I'm going to talk more about this in my next video, but I just wanted to include it for chronology reasons. I feel like my brain would start itching if I didn't include it. So, but yeah, more on that later. During this period, I also knit the Cumulus blouse by Petiteknit, which I made in Bliss from Pickles, Oslo, in the color, I think it's estragon. This yarn is a mix of alpaca, mohair and wool, and it's very soft, very lightweight, very warm, and it has a halo, which I really appreciate. I am quite happy with this. I've only recently started wearing it, even though I finished it in early May, I think, because I wasn't entirely sure about the color. I felt like it kind of clashed with too many things, and also my gauge is all over the place in this garment. In some places it's quite loose, in others it's very tight, and if you look closely it looks a bit strange, but I don't think anyone will actually notice, and it fits me just fine. So I'm not really that bothered by it anymore. I'm not really sure why that happened. I think maybe because I was very stressed at the time, that my attention changed from day to day. At least that's my theory. And another thing is that the V-neck has an I-cord edge, and you pick up stitches around the neckline to knit the I-cord edge, and then you start and you finish in the V, and you have to join the two pieces together, and I did a really crappy job at joining those two pieces together, so it looks very lumpy and weird, and that really bothered me at first, but I didn't really have it in me to redo it, and I haven't redone it since, but I think maybe I will just ignore it, and if it bothers me too much down the line I will change it at some other point. But yeah. As my finals were fast approaching, I decided to cast on another one of my early dream knits, which is the Humlebi shawl by Fibertales. I was a bit intimidated by the bee stitch, the bee pattern. I don't have that much experience doing texture, and when I have done texture it tends to hurt my wrists and my arms surprisingly much, so I'm always a bit hesitant to do textured knitting, even though I love the look of it. But I found that this texture was not painful to do at all for some reason. The yarn I used is Peruvian Highland from Filcolana. The color is mustard. And I finally decided on this yarn, which is quite a bit heavier than what the pattern calls for. But I couldn't find anything in the right yarn weight that also had a color I wanted and a look that I wanted, because I really wanted something that was a bit rustic, something that had a halo and was a bit more fluffier, more cozy, but also squishy and soft. And I also wanted a honey color or mustard yellow to highlight the fact that I had it upside down, to highlight the fact that these are bees and not flies or any other kind of insects. I had to knit it at a larger gauge, of course, which made for a much heavier shawl, but also a much larger shawl, which I'm very happy with, because I really wanted to be able to wrap it around myself and tie it in the back. And I noticed on Ravelry that a lot of people talked about how they wished the pattern was for a bigger shawl, and a lot of people have added repeats of the bee texture to make it wider. It's cast on, you cast on the outer edge first, and then you knit it smaller and smaller as you go, which feels very motivating. And the cast on was a bit interesting because I've never done anything like this before. It has a picot cast on, so you do those little bumps as you do the cast on, which wasn't difficult at all. I thought maybe it would be, but it was very easy, and you have to block it quite aggressively to get those bumps to be bumpy once you're done, but I think it adds a very nice touch. And as for the bee stitch itself, I was intimidated by it, but I practiced on a swatch and it turned out it wasn't that difficult at all. But there is a part in the pattern where you kind of have to take a leap of faith. You kind of just have to trust the process. I hope I'm not giving away too much of the pattern by saying this, but there is a point in the process where you have to drop a stitch, and then on the next row you knit that stitch in a different way. And I think this is also mentioned in the pattern, but you're going to feel so much better if you add a stitch marker to those dropped stitches, because I don't have the nerves to just drop a stitch and leave it there and trust that on the next row it will still be there and not be dropped even further down on yeah. No, so add a stitch marker and you're gonna feel so much better. But have I worn this? No, I have not worn this. Besides taking pictures for my Instagram, I have not worn this once, which is such an embarrassing thing to say. In May I had my finals and I was so very, very stressed. I had been stressed about this for a long time already, but I somehow managed to pass them with a good margin even. And as soon as I learned my results, which was just a few days later thankfully, I completely crashed. Now I have several chronic health issues, so crashing isn't anything new to me, but I was very burnt out at the same time, and I'm not really used to, my crashes are normally very physical, and I'm not that used to also being quite as mentally fatigued as I was at the time. And I didn't really have energy for anything. And this is when my knitting mojo took a very serious hit. And for a few weeks I didn't do anything at all. And I just felt like I needed a rest, which was probably the right decision. And then in June I went on a trip to the southern part of Western Norway, and on that road trip, because I was the passenger, I was not the driver, I started knitting another very V-neck raglan, which is a very mindless knit to me, so it seemed like a good choice for that trip. And here it is. This is knit in cotton merino from Mayflower, and the colorway is brunette. It's a summer sweater, which is very, very useful for me because I'm always cold in summer. As for the trip itself, I don't really have anything to share because I didn't film anything. And although this part of Western Norway is quite an important yarn hub, the most famous mill from this area is Sandnes Garn, and they have this huge outlet store, but I didn't go there because it didn't work out timing-wise. We were there on a Sunday, so that didn't work out. But we did go to an Iron Age museum in Stavanger, the Iron Age farm on Ullandhaug. It's an open-air museum. The buildings have been built directly on the roofs of longhouses from the migration era, which is very unusual. They have a lot of reconstructed warp-weighted looms and a lot of plant-dyed yarn on display. It's a very cool place if you're interested in textile history or just history in general, and you're ever on a yarn tour of Western Norway. I can absolutely recommend visiting that place. And the whole area is also grazed by sheep. And I bought a couple of skates of wool of yarn from those sheep, but I can't show you because I can't find them. You see, there's another thing that's been going on throughout this period. In these couple of years I've been knitting, I've bought way more yarn than I ever thought I would, and my yarn stash has really gotten a bit out of control, and it grew to a size where I couldn't have it in my living room anymore. And I had to store it in boxes and put it... I've been storing it under beds, in closets, in corners, behind furniture, just wherever I could fit some yarn, really. And I tried to have some kind of an organizing system here, but it became impossible to keep up with it. And I just kept forgetting where I put everything, and I kept forgetting what I actually have. It took me some time to realize this, but when I can't see or touch my stash, I also really lose inspiration. I don't know, I really need to be surrounded by my stash in some visual way to really sustain my knitting mojo. So had I known that, I wouldn't have been so quick to store my yarn in other places. And then I rearranged my living room, and then I really didn't have any place to keep it in my living room. So it has just lived in random places around the house for several months. And of course I never intended to keep it that way permanently. But the thing is, I've been renovating a room upstairs, which is going to become my craft room. I'm very excited about it. I've been working on it for a couple of years now, and I'm so close to finishing it now. It's been a long journey, a really long journey. It was covered in this really thick glass fiber, yellow glass fiber. Is it called no, fiberglass? I think it's called fiberglass in English, wallpaper. Just getting rid of that was like a whole thing. didn't think it would take me so long to get to this point, and I thought I would already have moved my yarn stash upstairs like months ago by this time. So I was perhaps a bit quick to move my yarn stash out of the living room. So whenever I did feel some kind of a knitting itch, just getting the yarn I wanted, finding the yarn I wanted, took quite a bit of an effort, and when you already struggle with your effort to do things, that's really not an ideal situation. So yeah, but I'm very close to finishing my craft room and moving my yarn in a more, in a better location. Enough about my craft room. I was able to finish this in a very timely manner, and I thought maybe my knitting mojo is back. Maybe I should keep knitting, and I did. So my next project I chose was this warm Betty jacket which is a design by Pickles Oslo. I knit from stash, so that's why it's short sleeved and it's quite a bit shorter, quite a bit more cropped than what the pattern instructs you to do. But I really didn't want to buy any more yarn, I just wanted to knit from stash. The yarn is Kremke soul wool, which is made from recycled textile. So it contains both natural and synthetic fibers. And I really appreciate anyone who wants to make recycled yarn. I chose this because I wanted to knit something with a very big, small gauge. The gauge is 15, I think. So it's a very quick knit, very satisfying when you struggle with your motivation. And since it's only short-sleeved, it was even quicker. But I haven't finished it. I haven't really finished it. This is a cardigan, and I have made the button bands, incredibly, but I haven't added the buttons. And I don't know why, but it's not very difficult to attach buttons, but it wasn't really the best choice for this time. This pattern wasn't the best choice after all, because that extra step of adding buttons turned out to be a bit too much effort for my low effort needs. So I haven't done that yet, but I will do it in time for next summer. We are now in July and I decided to try knitting socks again. I quite enjoy knitting socks, but I tend to get some pain issues when doing them, so I haven't done a lot of sock knitting so far. But these are Sunday socks by Petiteknit, which I knit in solid from Jessie garn, which is an alpaca based sock yarn. I'm very happy with these. They were so easy to knit. I didn't have any pain issues at all, and I felt very motivated to keep knitting socks after making this pair. And I decided to cast on one of my dream sock knits, which is a shortcut to mushrooms by Anna Sjösvärd, and it did not work out. I only knitted one sock, and this sock really tanked my knitting mojo for months. And this sounds so terrible to say, and I just have to emphasize that this is not because of the design. There's nothing wrong with it. It's well written, and I don't love this sock, but I love how the design looks. The pattern is great, I just really failed at it. My first mistake was the yarn choice. This is Aravetta by Filcolana, which is a very slick and slippery sock yarn. The recommended yarn is a much more rustic yarn, and I think that would have complemented the design a lot more. And rustic yarns have more grip, so it's harder to... So if you do drop a stitch, it's harder to drop a stitch, but if you do drop a stitch, it doesn't unravel quite as easily. This type of yarn tends to highlight any wonky stitches. It's very unforgiving. But the worst part was just how slippery it was, so I kept dropping a lot of stitches, which is when those stitches are very tiny. it's extra difficult to pick them up again, and because the yarn is so slippery, they tended to unravel quite a few rows before I would notice, and sometimes I would knit several rounds before I even noticed I had dropped the stitch, so that was very, very annoying. The sock is knit toe up, and it's a form-fitting sock, which is a very new technique to me. And this is a left sock, and your big toe goes here and your little toe goes here. The socks are knit the same way until you get to the heel, and then how you place your heel decides if this will be a left sock or a right sock. So the technique is the same in the beginning for both. And I struggled so much with this construction. I didn't struggle to understand it, but I struggled to make it look nice. I really, really tried, and it looks terrible. This is the side facing up. It's quite wonky, there are quite some gaping holes here, but the other side is way worse. I mean, look at that. That doesn't look very nice. And if I were to do this again, this would have to be the side facing up. I'm sure I could do some kind of surgery or extra stitches to tie the whole thing together, but it was just too much. The heel is just a regular short row heel, but I even managed to get some holes here, which I guess is to be expected and would be easy to fix by all means. And then you get to the what most people would call the fun part, the colorwork part. And even here I really struggled. This is a very, very simple chart. Very small, very simple chart. But even so, I managed to misinterpret it many times, and I had to re-knit it many times. I forgot to use bigger needles, so my gauge was way too tight and I couldn't get it over my foot, and then I had to redo it one more time. It was kind of ridiculous. And did I add a lifeline at any point during this process? No, I did not. So by the time I did the bind off, I was so exhausted by this sock, so tired of it, and I haven't actually finished it either because I haven't added the white spots for the fly agaric. I suppose it's meant to be fly agaric mushrooms, and you're supposed to embroider the white spots on when you're done with the rest. But I never did that because I was so exhausted by the sock, and knitting another one was out of the question. This was in early August, and it would be late October before I even attempted knitting again. So yeah, thoroughly tanked my knitting mojo, which I absolutely hate saying like that, but it's what happened. But I haven't given up on knitting these socks sometime again in the future, in a different yarn of course. I still really love the design, and I want to be able to do it, but not right now. Findus! Hei! Er du våken? My cat has woken up and is ready to begin his day. Hi, Findus. Oh. But even though I didn't do any knitting those months, I did a lot of natural dyeing. We had another incredible mushroom season in my area, and I spent all of my free time out in the woods looking for mushrooms, for both culinary mushrooms and mushrooms for dyeing. I just have to share some of the dyeing I've been doing. These are all from Cortinarius semisanguineus, or other closely related species, which is the red gilt webcap or surprise webcap. My cat is making this kind of difficult. I'm just so endlessly fascinated by all the colors you can get from one species of mushrooms. And while these are not all from the same batch of mushrooms, they could have been, because you can get a very wide variety of colors from just one batch of mushrooms, depending on which mordants you use and what color the wool bases are naturally, and also which order you do things in, because different pigments will release at different points in the process. This is alum on a grey base, and this is iron on a white base. This is alum on a white base, and this is alum on a grey base. It absolutely matters which color you choose for your base. And these two are alum on a white base, but they are from a later dye bath. And this trio is from Cortinarius cinnamomeus, and I'm not sure what the English name is, but I'm guessing it's something like cinnamon webcap. And this is on alum on a light grey base, this is alum on a white base, and this is iron on a grey base. I'm so fascinated by mushroom dyeing, but it takes a lot of time and dedication to pick enough to do a dye bath. But that makes it just all the more satisfying when you get there. And there are so many things to explore, so many things. So yeah, very, very fun. In October I went on a family trip to northern Germany, so we went by car through Sweden, Denmark, and through Germany down to Hanover, and then the same way back. And we made a stop at the Wall Museum in Oldenburg, which is an open-air museum. It's a reconstructed Slavic settlement from the early Middle Ages. A wonderful place, absolutely recommend it. They have a lot of textile-related things on display, like warp-weighted looms. They have a big garden, a big dye garden. Just lots of stuff, and of course a lot of plant-dyed fibers in the gift shop. So of course I had to get some. I bought this big skein of not very historical, squishy, soft yarn dyed in with onion skins. It looks much more green in real life. On camera it looks more yellow, but it's a very lovely, rich, golden, warm color, and I really love it. But the yarn is not very historical, but that's okay. And then I got some linen thread, which I thought would come in handy. And then I got this assortment of plant-dyed embroidery floss. I don't know how to embroider, but I felt very inspired to learn how to embroider. I still haven't done it, but I'm halfway there, right? I got kind of excited by seeing these in the gift shop, and it was also very nice to feel that that excitement over possibly learning how to embroider. So that was also very, very healing. And then in late October I finally felt ready to start knitting again, but this time I chose my project more carefully. I chose the Siris Simple Sweater, or Siris Simple Raglan, by a Norwegian designer called Krauseri. This is a very, very simple, basic raglan, a very mindless knit, which seemed like the perfect choice for me at that time. I wanted to make just a big, cozy sweater, and a big, soft, squishy, cozy sweater. And the yarn is appropriately named Cozy, which is by Pickles, Oslo. I've knit with this yarn many times before, and I think of it as a comfort yarn for a comfort knit. It felt very appropriate. It's an alpaca blow yarn, so it's very soft and very suitable for a turtleneck. The gauge is, I believe it is 17, which is kind of perfect for my circumstances. I'm also working on a sweater from last year. This is the Festive Yoke by Skeindeer knits. I didn't have time to really finish it in time for Christmas last year, so I left it short sleeved and very cropped. But now I'm adding long sleeves. I still have one sleeve to go, and I might add some length on the body, but we'll see how far I get before I'm running out of time. So, but this has a gauge of 24, which is quite different from 17. But I find that working with it is it's fine. It's just stockinette. It also feels really good to complete something from last year, which I didn't really feel like I had finished the way I wanted to. So that's where I'm at now. I feel a lot of inspiration again. I feel a lot of joy about knitting again. So I'm very relieved. And if you have some experiences or stories about your knitting mojo you would like to share, I would love to hear about it in the comment section. And if you're still watching, just know I appreciate it so very, very much, and I will see you again soon. And until then, we hope you have a very lovely early December.